Now, Nigeria's annual inflation rose to 28.20% in November from 27.33% in October. The National Bureau of Statistics has said, and according to the Statistics Office, food and non-alcoholic beverages are, were the biggest contribution to the rise in the inflation. In its new Consumer Price Index, November 2023 released on Friday, the National Bureau of Statistics revealed that headline inflation surged by 0.87% points in November to a new record high in almost 2 decades. Now, this development is what we're going to be talking about, and we have in the studio Steve Nwachukwu. Mr. Steve Nwachukwu is an economist and lead researcher at Steward Asset Management Limited. And also later we'll be joined by Mouktar Mohammed, who is a financial analyst virtually. But then, good morning, Mr. Steve. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me once again.
All right, let's talk about, this report that was done by the NBS. As an economist, can you provide an overview of, the kind of findings that the National Bureau of Statistics did on the inflation rate, the headline of Nigeria's inflation rate?
First is that data, statistics, information relating to figures like inflation rate, food inflation, and all those statistical figures that Nigeria needed to be working with the fiscal authority and even with the monetary authority are monthly basis discharged by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. It is their duty in 15th of every month to release a monthly data information relating to food inflation, relating to unemployment, relating all data released by these very agencies, and which in their ritual manner they have made us to understand that the inflation have risen by more than 83 basis points, this time from 27.33 to 28.2. And food inflation is where my concern is, and the concern of most Nigerians, because as an economist or analyst, all we are looking at, how does these very variables, both on figure and living realities of Nigeria, reflect on daily, both on government revenue, both on the living condition, both on balance of payment. These are what all of us are concerned about. And this time, food inflation has got up to the highest figure, over 32 or 31.8%, and that should worry leadership of the government. At this point, I believe that these informations are within the purview of those in the villa at the presidency and those ministries and agencies of government. What can we do? This number is becoming alarming. This is the essence of this number. The numbers are not just like it's a ritual, dish at these numbers on monthly basis. It's for government to work on those numbers. Is the numbers reflecting good living condition of Nigerians? No. Is the numbers suggesting that government needs to do something about food? This is the main driver.
But Steve, we've been talking about what should government do for as long as I can remember about this issue of inflation. And each time we see CBN, for instance, take certain steps and certain policy pronouncements and so on. How effective would you say that some of these steps taken by the CBN has performed in terms of taming the inflation that we're dealing with?
At this point, I think he has no expectation from CBN, in the sense that most of those very policies and variables within the CBN to tighten policies to at least fight inflation figures, CBN must have exhausted all of them. Is it the CPR, the cash reserve ratio? Is it the inflation MPR? It's about 18.75%. In fact, to be honest and fair to CBN, the last 2 meetings that CBN ought to have had, which they aborted, was as a result of what can we do? We have tightened too much.
So CBS has exhausted all that it can do right now and is helpless.
The data, the statistics available suggest that. Because these are not, the inflationary figures has nothing to do with the monetary policies. They are fiscal policy driven. Just like we are talking about food inflation. What will CBN do? That was why the last administration of CBN indulged in even fiscal policies, entered into anchor borrowers, just to make sure that these foods, these crops, these grains are available.
So that's scary if you say that. Where do we look at now? Where do we look to? I mean,
we have to look at Mr. President. We have to look at the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Trade and Industry, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of National Planning. These are the guys we need to start dishing out policy to tackle most of these numbers. These numbers are not reflective of how Nigeria should be.
All right, Mr. Steve, we do have a lot to talk about, but then let's take a quick break, and when we come back, of course, the discussion continues, so stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on Daybreak Extra. We're talking about the inflation rate that has risen in the month of November. Now, we have in the studio with us Steve Nwachukwu. Now, Mr. Steve, you're talking about, how this thing is taking a toll in the country, especially in the food, inflation. So right now, are we not even scared? Because some Nigerians are a bit doubtful of if that percentage that the NBS has released is the actual figure. Is there any fear that it could be more?
Yes, it's the fears of most of us, and I've often said it. In as much, that's why sometimes we need to work on building the soundness and strongness of institutions of government, like the CBN, like the Independent National Electoral Commission, like the Bureau of Statistics, name it. Let them not, manipulate numbers and data to the favor of the government. Most times they come out with this so that it's not too damaging to the government, but they should be totally independent and say truth to the power. This is the numbers. Like someone like me, based on the available statistics, living realities that is available there, the inflation figure is above. The core inflation figure should be above 30%, but relatively you are having 28.2%. Let's work, like I said, it's an institution of government. Let's work with what they have. But whatever they have with, it's still not good enough. It's still not good enough. You see, since this very drive of this inflationary drive or trajectory, I think like 2 years ago or thereabout, CBN has maintained this tightening posture from somewhere around 11% MPR. CBN have moved it consecutively to 18.75%, more than 700 basis points. And what does that mean? It means that cost of raising money from the commercial banks is going up because CBN is trying to tighten to reduce the money in circulations. Even these issues around scarcity and the rest of them, it could still be a soft measures of the CBN, because when you make sure that it's a lesser, yes, it also has its own ripple effect if you are not well managed. When people are looking for cash, it means that it reduces their spending variety of items they may possibly spend in a day. It also not drive those cash that is available in the system is not driving inflation. So I don't know what to say, to be honest. If the 6 if this is the measure by CBN, also to reduce, because this Xmas period, people intend to spend some. I'm sorry, I'm taking it totally out of the economic purview or whatever the variables that we can use to judge what CBNs should be doing and what the fiscal authority should be doing. But as it stands now, it suggests that it's also a corny way of trying to tighten.
Steve, no matter how, no matter what the case is, there's no doubt that there's inflation in Nigeria. Everybody is feeling the heat, whether it's put at 28% or 30% or whatever. There's something going on economically, and we all know it.
Going wrong.
Now, Nigeria has one of the highest inflation rates in on the continent of Africa,
yes,
as well. So earlier you mentioned that the ministries of agriculture and so on, these are more of administrative bodies. What can they really do? Are there options before them that they can really use to, curb this?
Yes, a lot of options. All the options are within their purview. All the options. Like I said earlier, CBN have exhausted its own options. CBN have exhausted. Will CBN move the cash reserve ratio to somewhere around 35? That means you are taking almost a lot of the money from the commercial banks.
So production here is
thank you,
is something that we need to pay attention to.
That's exactly.
What can the Ministry of Agriculture do in this instance?
I don't know why you ask that. What can the Ministry of Agriculture do? What should they be doing as a Minister of Agriculture? They should be moving in there, looking for available lands, making more farm mechanization, taking up these hectares of land, making available this crop. At least the grains that is being scarce in our now a crate of egg is selling above 2,005, depending your location, 3,000, 2,000 to 3,000. So what is rising this cost of it is the grains. Now corn is a byproduct of these field materials that's used for the chicken to produce the eggs. So what are you doing to make sure that those at least the corns are available? A loaf of bread is selling above 1,005, 1,008, 2,000 to 1,002, depending your location and depending the brand. What are you doing to make sure those grains are available so that the cost of this very input cost around these very items are reduced? These are the things. So Minister of Agriculture has a lot to do around that.
Do you think that perhaps there are some international dimensions to the crisis? I believe there should be. When you talk about wheat, for instance, the supply of wheat for bread, like you mentioned here, is somewhat, locally we do not have enough. We do not produce enough wheat to produce as much, to meet the demands.
That's the essence of why we are calling that Ministry of Agriculture.
So don't you think that perhaps the ministries, it's also has gone beyond them? Okay,
I think we need to put these things in perspective. This was a challenge 2, 3, 4 years ago. That was why you saw the central bank former governor Emefiele, came up with this anchor borrowers program. What was the main purpose of the anchor? This is a fiscal decision. Like I said, let's take it to perspective. He came up with the anchor borrowers program just to tackle this issue of shortage of wheat, shortage of grains. So the purpose of that very program was to lend to real farmers, so that those farmers will move into their farmlands and make available these grains that is scarce. Once this commodity is scarce, price goes up, and if price goes up, their byproducts goes up. Like the bag of rice went up, the a loaf of bread went up, the eggs went up, because these are all byproducts of these very items or crop items. So the Anchor Borrowers program was meant to tackle the shortage.
Didn't yield any result then?
Now the question is,
if we are dealing with this now, then it means that the impact
because
is really not
the point is
there.
When you have a government that is not sincere to the core, I think it was even the fears of the CBN that they actually superheaded that program. Otherwise, it should have been a Ministry of Agriculture or Bank of Agriculture core program. But CBN felt that politicians will hijack it, because it takes also belief that it's the politician that occupies and populates these ministries of agriculture and the rest. So CBN wanted to, let me see if I can lend to the real farmers. If they ended up portfolio farmers or political portfolio farmers, That's why that program was not successful. But as we speak, even the Pyro, when he was doing it, there was a rice pyramids display by a former president, just to say that the anchor borers was effective. But the rice are not there, because the rice will, the best way to know that the rice is available is to see those price of those commodities in the market cheaper. That is the main essence. Like I said, we're looking at inflation figure. What are these drivers of this inflation figure? If the grains are available in the market, the price will drop and it will reduce this inflation figure.
Okay. All right, let's go to Mouktar Mohammed, financial analyst, who is joining us via phone for his own perspectives. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning, Mouktar.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's get your own take on the recent development as regards the inflation rate in the country. We've seen an increase in that respect. What do you make of what's happening, and whether or not the steps that we've taken to tame inflation has yielded any results, really?
Well, it has not yielded any results. But last time I was in your program, I told you where the CBN were excited about that their hiking rate has also brought down inflation. And unfortunately, the numbers were not the same of what the CBN was telling us. I'm not surprised where we are today in terms of inflation figure. I said it also in your program that I think inflation should end in 30% before the end of the year. We're doing about 28 point something percent now. It's still not looking good. The major cause of inflationary pressure is external driven forces. And when I talk about external driven forces, I'm talking about the exchange rate. As long as this rate is unstable, is volatile, we'll continue to see inflationary pressure goes up, because over 80% of what we consume, we bring it out of the shore of this country. Even if what we consume even the remaining 20%, the machinery for producing those 20% also have been brought outside the shore of this country. So when you add that together, you realize that 100% of whatever we do has to come outside the shore of this country. And that alone, with the exchange rate going this high, then government is not able to tame it or bring stability to it. It's causing the inflationary pressure. You can do all you want to do. You can hike rate, that is not the problem. Nigerian inflationary pressure is driven by macroeconomic instability, is driven by monetary policy, and also is driven by cost of production, and then also demand and supply. Because when you look at cost of production have gone high because cost of energy has gone high, and cost of transportation has gone high because cost of energy have gone high. So definitely all these will have a negative impact on the production capability of the farmers. So I'm not surprised. And if you look at this inflationary pressure, it's largely driven by food prices that have gone up by almost 35%. And I can say that it's even more than that. But again, why is this food prices going up, even when some of these things are provided locally? It's because of the cost of production. Why is these things going up, even when they are built in outside the shop? It's because of the demand and supply. So government need to begin to look at inflationary pressure in the area of exchange rate and also in the area of demand and supply. If you are able to address these two issues, naturally inflationary pressure will come down.
All right, Mouktar, let's talk about another thing that was specific in the NBS report, where they mentioned that Lagos, Kogi, and Rivers states are among the expensive states in Nigeria. Why is that happening? What do you think is behind that?
I'm surprised we have Kogi State there, and that should not be a plus to the government of Kogi State, because for Lagos State, we know why. Because of, like I said, demand and supply. We have a lot of people in Lagos. The demand for product are high, the supply is low. So generally, the cost will go up. And cost of doing business in Lagos is going up by the day. And we talk about rents are going up also in Lagos. So I'm not too surprised about that. Also, I'm not surprised about what is happening in Rivers. Remember that locally, Rivers doesn't produce anything again because of the land has been polluted because of oil activity. So I'm not too surprised what we are getting in Rivers State in terms of, but I'm only very, very surprised with Kogi State. And I'm also surprised that Abuja also is not finding itself into that space. And that could be due to this, to the type of stability and security that you have around places around Abuja, like the Kaduna and Niger State. Before now, those insecurity in those places were high. But when you look at, if you drive from Suleja to a place as far as Bida, Peko, the insurgency hasn't got into those places. So they are still having production. And also in Kaduna now is clear, especially the rural area, because of the security that have been addressed. So I believe that's why Abuja is not in that midst. But for Lagos, I'm not surprised it's there because, again, most of Lagos also products are produced from the northeast, especially food items. Rivers State, the same thing, they move this product from the north. And when you have instability and you have production costs in these places, it has a way of affecting these places.
All right, well, let's go back to the studio, Steve. Mouktar mentioned the issue of the exchange rate as, part of the reasons why we're seeing the high inflation rates that we have right now. Do you think that the unification of the exchange rate has something to do with this, and what's the way forward? At the aftermath of the unification of the exchange rate, the presidency made a statement that if need be, there will be a review of this decision by the government. Are we there yet? Are we at that point where we need to look at that decision of unifying the exchange rate, and what can we do in that respect?
Yes, if you ask if we are there, we have been there for more than, apart from the day 2 of that very policy of government. Government ought to have refacts and look at the main issues. Just like Mouktar said, imported inflation is what we are suffering, in the sense that every single item that a manufacturer produces, whether raw material or even the machineries, that is a dollar related to it, in the sense that once the exchange is not stable and they are buying exchange rate at the parallel market or the official exchange window within above 1,000, 1,200, it will reflect in these very figures we are seeing, the inflation figures. So imported inflation has been the major issues we are having. And how can we tackle it? Most of us have been kind of, increasingly we have on daily basis offered these very opinions to governments, and we've not been seeing government posture around it to make sure that these things are being tackled based on the realities. One, you cannot tackle the issue of the scarcity of forest if you don't up your product. There are 2 major factors. One is the supply push, and the second is the demand push. The supply push is the insufficient supply of forests to the market. You cannot talk about flotation when you don't have a sufficient supply to meet the rising demand on a daily basis. What is the source of this very supply for us? Is the production and the sales proceeds of crude oil. What has happened to the sales proceeds of our crude oil? We've listened and we've heard that NNPC should tell us where the dollars are. So these are the main issues. So on daily basis, we repeatedly say the same things. What can government do about the demand curve? The demand curve has to do with this input cost. Demand curve has to do with the increasing demand of this very product, foreign-made product, appetite for foreign-made products. So what can government do to tackle it? Backward integration program is there, import substitution program. And what have we seen government done in this regards? We have seen nothing. So there is no how you put up a policy and you don't have a backup or a stopgap measure to make sure a pay review sort of, so that you can have to assess. As it stands now, government ought to have.
Okay.
There's nothing like allowing the exchange to float while that you have insufficient supply of forest.
All right, let's get some final thoughts from Mouktar Mohammed. Mouktar, each time we have this conversation, it goes back to the issue of production, how to boost production and increase exports and so on as the only way out. Have we done any better in the past few months, if you like, as regards our production? And what's the challenge?
Well, I think in terms of production, what we think we are gaining in terms of input in production, so crude oil production, sometimes we also lose in other areas. Let me give an example. Our quota of production in oil have increased, but the cost of oil, the cost of refining of petroleum has gone up because we refine it the shore of this country. So one area that we need to deal with in terms of production is the oil and gas sector. Once we deal with that area, we attack more effects into our economy. Rather than refining abroad, paying in dollars, we can now refine here locally. And that will help NNPC sell in dollar and be able to repatriate these funds into the country. And that would boost our liquidity. So in terms of food production, I don't think we've been able to achieve more because I think the previous government has paid lip service to some of these things. And I think as far as I'm concerned, it was all propaganda, like my colleague in the studio said, where's the rice pyramid that was in Abuja? So we've not paid attention to this area. And if you want to pay attention to this area to increase production, then you need to begin to look at how can you get the farmers in the rural area have funding. And when I'm talking about funding, I'm talking about single-digit funding. We used to have the Agricultural and Cooperative Bank that normally give loans to farmers for a single-digit rate, but we don't have that again. The CBN in itself is not a deposit bank. It's not. That's why I'm so excited when the CBN governor said we'll no more be lending money. That it's not in your prerogative to do that. Rather, you should use the commercial bank because they are the one that will be able to collect the loans back. So I think the CBN, the government, the monetary policy is good. Even no matter what the monetary policy is doing, and the physical side is just sitting and not doing anything, it will not have any effect. So I think they need to sit down together and synergize together and see how farmers can get cheap funding to begin to boost production, because the cost of production itself is high. So the only way cost of goods and services will come down is if government will be able to subsidize farmers in terms of the area of production. I don't mean subsidy in terms of giving them subsidy. Subsidy in the terms of giving them soft loans that are single digit, and that will help them bring down cost of production and be able to compete favorably with the goods that are coming out from the shore of this country. Because what we are seeing is that the bag of rice and those that are coming in from the locals and the ones that are coming abroad, the differences are not much. And so Nigeria keep patronizing the foreign ones because they believe they are better than the local ones. So, but when we begin to see those differences, and those differences can only happen when the cost of production is down.
Right.
Thank you so much, Mouktar Mohammed, financial analyst, for giving your review. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure always. Thank you.
All right, quickly, I want to ask this question to you, Steve. What are the reactions that we are anticipating from the financial markets in Nigeria due to this inflation report?
Well, the data are not even for the financial markets to consume. It's rather for the government to start doing things to make sure that this number starts reflecting good. As it stands now, it's not telling, it's really like a reflection that Nigerians are suffering. Inflation means that the strength and the value of those monies you have deposited in the banks are dropping by this very percentage in monthly or in yearly or annual quarterly manner. So it should be the government that should be putting up policies to actually see if they can address most of these issues.
So there is no fear that people might take advantage of this report to, up prices?
Oh, of course, the prices are already up. It's now the government to have to put up fiscal policies to see that these very numbers that is up comes down. How do we attack it? By input costs. What is government doing to make sure electricity is supplied so that the cost of producing those items that is available in the market comes down? What is government doing also to incentivize the system? Like we are talking about the agricultural product. What are those input costs? What are those very farm inputs that government can subsidize their prices, and those very cropping items, cropping seed and the rest are made available for government? What is also government doing around insecurity? These are the realities that we need from government.
Well, quite a lot for government to do. Thank you so much, Steve Nwachukwu. Steve Nwachukwu is an economist and also lead researcher at Steward Asset Management Limited. We thank you for joining us on Daybreak this morning and sharing your perspectives with us.
Thanks for having me.